My life is a miracle. Every child has a story of God's love to share. Shalom World, tune into God's love story.
Suffice it to say, God took his time to teach me, as if I were a child.
Ignatius wanted us to know that our smallest action can make a world of difference to one person.
Shooting the actual locations where St. Ignatius walked, it becomes more authentic.
Through these exercises and through this way of praying, you start to realize he's speaking to all of us.
St. Ignatius himself was kind of acting as our co-executive producer.
But he's a Loyola.
Our film, it's not about the whole life of St. Ignatius. It's about the conversion.
Welcome to Shalom World's Beyond the Vision, a show that features faith-based film, television, and theater. I'm your host, Joelle Maryn, and I'm so excited to share with you the film Ignacio De Loyola. Based on the true story of St. Ignatius of Loyola, it tells of a soldier who was a sinner turned saint. The film brings hope to all of us and will inspire us to be who God created us to be.
How many? 12,000, possibly more. Pamplona is lost, Loyola.
I say we fight.
He wants to become a pilgrim. He wants to go to Jerusalem and beg his way there like the holy pilgrims of old.
But he's a Loyola. What will people say?
If you could hear the voice of God, would you want to keep it secret?
You know what this council is capable of. Do you really want to die?
I have faced death before. It does not scare me.
I have with us today the director, Paolo Dy, and the producer, Pauline Saltarin. Welcome to the show, Paolo and Pauline.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for the invite.
So I have to tell you, I'm a huge fan of St. Ignatius of Loyola, so I was so excited to see this film, and I know it's going to bring hope to so many people, especially those who think there's no way that they could become a saint. Paolo, I'd like to ask you, St. Ignacio was initially looking for acceptance and a sense of belonging, but like many of us, he tried to find these things in the world. Can you give us an overview of the film and the story behind it?
Yeah, so Saint Ignatius is a very striking life story, doesn't he? He started out as a soldier who loved everything about all these worldly things, valor and women and all these things that he was chasing. He had dreams of gaining military victory. He had dreams of pledging himself to a lady. In our version of the story, we say it's Princess Catalina of Spain, and he just wanted this whole romantic vision of what it means to be a gentleman and a successful person and soldier in his time. And so when all these plans were laid waste, when at the siege of Pamplona, when he suffered a almost critical injury to his knee, he got hit by a cannonball at the siege of Pamplona. He had to recover from these wounds for a few months, and being stuck at home and thinking about how his life has been changed, probably he's facing failure for the rest of his life, he found solace in the two books that remained in his castle. And these books turned out to be the life of Christ and the lives of the saints. And in reading these books, slowly he began to realize that there is a different kind of heroism, there is a different kind of valor, and that is in finding your purpose in dedicating your life to Christ. And in many ways, that kind of dedication requires even more bravery than that needed on a battlefield or that needed on, in normal life. So he said, this might be the greater cause or the greater purpose that I can aspire to. And so he dedicated his life to that. And it was really, really tough going. In many ways, when we were, I grew up in a Jesuit institution, and so the story of Saint Ignatius is very much ingrained in our in our psyche. But as you grow older, you want a sort of like you want more than just the grade school understanding of Saint Ignatius, where he got injured, he read the book about Christ, and he was converted. I wanted to explore what would go into that kind of conversion and how difficult it can be to move from this very world centric, world worshipping kind of life into a life dedicated to Christ. And how, he did not find it easy is one of my main themes there. Because nobody finds it easy. And it's only through the grace of God, through the love of Christ, that we can find our way back to him. So basically, that's what we wanted to explore, and the struggles of that, and what he had to go through, and the pain and suffering that he had to go through. But again, through the grace of God, he made it through, and he became a saint.
Yeah, and the fact that he injured his leg and now finally was stopped from going about doing things his way and had no choice but to sit still.
Had no
And then now what? Now what do you do when your whole life just sits, when you're just stuck and you're still? Then he finally could hear the voice of God. So it's amazing how the Lord can bring something great out of something that seems so terrible. Pauline, I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to make this film?
Initially, what we really wanted to do was to tell the story of St. Ignatius to this generation of students of the schools in the Philippines. So our primary target audience, really the students here. No, we didn't know that it was going to. When Paolo came in, of course, that took a different turn because Paolo had his own vision of the film. And then the secondary target audience were the general public, because we wanted the story of Saint Ignatius to be known to the rest of the public. So it was just a little project in the very beginning. It wasn't supposed to be this, this big epic.
Yeah, and it's amazing because you started with just something small, even just a little vision, a little bit of money, and then poof, God provides. If the Lord wills something, that was St. Ignatius was all about, what is God's will? What does he will? And when he wills something, nothing and nobody can stop you. And we have to talk about the actors, because the acting in the film was also incredible. Paulo, can you share with us a little bit more about the casting process for this film, and how did you find these amazing actors?
Yeah, we were very lucky that one of our family friends, a friend of my wife, who's my co-director, our friend Chris Downs from Spain. He's Spanish American Filipino, and he's actually like sort of a mainstay whenever Hollywood films go to Spain, because he knows all the actors over there, and he acts as like he's part of the assistant directors team and so on. He's a director in his own right. He knew all of the actors in Spain who could speak and perform in English. And so he was able to send us some fantastic actors. We had readings, we had auditions, and a whole ton of them were really, really great, and most of them made it into the film. Our lead actor, Andreas Munoz, British-trained theater actor, actually, and film actor. And he flew over just to audition for us in Spain. And when we saw him and we saw him perform, he just completely nailed it. He just absolutely into the character right away. And it was really hard to think about anybody else after that point, because there's an adage in acting, I'm sure you know, that the actor who walks in already owning the role He came in, he owned the role, he was so passionate about it. And in him, we saw this whole combination of the ability to play both ice and fire. Because that was Ignatius. Those are the two sides of Ignatius's psyche. He had the fire of passion at the beginning of his life, but then he had to meld it with the water, with a cool, side of his personality. And in the balance of the two, that's where he found his strength, and in fact his redemption as well. So that quality we saw in Andreas, and it was phenomenal.
Yeah, he definitely owned the role. And, it's amazing when you watch a film and the characters, they're not characters anymore. They're the people. You really believe that they are who they say they are. And that's what draws you into the story. So phenomenal job with casting and great acting all the way around. Paulo, Ignacio's desire to protect and be a hero, it wasn't bad in itself, but it was misdirected towards worldly pursuits. And after his conversion, when he considered doing these worldly things for vainglory, it left him in torment. And when the thought of doing good things for God's glory and being a knight of heaven, then he was left in peace and hope. Can you share with us about the spiritual exercises, also known as the Manual of War in the film, and how we are all called to be the army of God?
One of Ignatius's greatest gifts to the world was his spiritual exercises, and it's a set of prayers and thought exercises and so on that you can use as kind of like a manual for your spiritual life. And this came from his own personal experience of having to discern whether this feeling or that feeling, this spirit or that spirit, whether this was good or bad, whether it was leading him towards God or leading him away from it. So this was a wonderful discovery for him, and this is what he wanted to share with so many people who would be going through that same discernment. And the one of the main thoughts is that if you have a thought or an event or something facing you, you have to sit down and pray about it and think about whether it is leading you towards God or leading you away, whether it's bringing you peace or bringing you pain or torment, And even if a decision is hard to do, if it leaves you in peace, then that is probably where God wants you to go. So it's these principles that he put it together in a way that ordinary people could pray about and digest and use in their daily lives. And it's basically just a wonderful way to find your way back to God.
Yeah, and these spiritual exercises help us to not just find peace, but to find out God's will, which is where our peace is. And so many people are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. That's why they need to see this film, because this film is going to say, here's what you need to do. Here's how to hear God's voice. And people are like, God doesn't speak to me. But through these exercises and through this way of praying, you start to realize he's speaking to all of us.
What do you see?
7 red bars on a gold field, and 2 rampant grey wolves flanking a cooking pot.
The red bars, as you know, were granted by the king to honor the bravery of the 7 brothers, Oñath, your forebears. The wolves and the pot stand
for the generosity of the Loyola family. That after our men have eaten, there is enough for even the wolves, I know.
Pauline, can you share with us some of the on-location challenges that you had in regard to the production and the design and how they were overcome? Because this was not a small production. From the costumes to the characters to the locations, I'm sure you had some challenges. What were they, and how did God help you overcome them?
When we first went there, we realized that it won't be easy to, it will be very costly to rent props and rent costumes in Spain. So what we did was we make everything, fabricate everything here in the Philippines, and just ship all of those. So that's like 5 tons worth of props and costumes all the way to Spain. So that was just one of the problems. When you get there, you find out that you don't have a warehouse where you can store your props in.
Over and over again during the making of this film, Pauline and I saw this theme of the whole production was that Saint Ignatius himself was kind of acting as our co-executive producer on this thing, because everywhere we went, we would run into people who, well, we were in Basque Country and we were in his country, in other words, right? Who would discover that we were making a film about St. Ignatius and say, hey, how can I help? Use my warehouse. Go ahead. Use our facility over here. We can lend you these. A shepherd would come by just when we needed a scene with sheep. And he would say, hey,
That's
use my
amazing.
sheep. Go ahead. Yeah, we needed rustic bread, faithful to the era, to the way that it was done in that era. And the shepherd would say, oh, my brother makes this artisanal bread that looks like from that. It would be a million stories like that.
You're doing a film abroad. You're in unfamiliar territory. So it was very important for us to feel that God was with us during that time.
Yeah, St. Ignatius was saying, you've got home court advantage here, so don't worry.
I
Yes.
love that. I love it. Yeah, and the divine providence. It's you put the
That's
need
what.
out there, the prayer out there, and then God does put He gives us the resources, the people, the locations. And how did you find these beautiful locations? What was the location search like for the film?
Well, Spain is very beautiful to begin with. Everywhere you look, the landscape is beautiful. We wanted to shoot particularly in the Basque Country. It was probably a crazy idea looking back to want to shoot inside the Castle of Loyola, because the castle is actually a museum. So, we could only shoot at night when it was closed, yeah. But then it was worth it because you're shooting in the actual locations where St. Ignatius walked. It becomes more authentic.
And without the cinematography, without the lighting, without these beautiful locations and costumes, it wouldn't bring us in so deeply into it, but we feel like we are there with him. So excellent job on that. Paulo, I love the scene where St. Ignatius is with the prostitute, but this time, instead of using her, he's truly beginning to see her and know her as a person. And more importantly, he wants to bring her to the Lord for healing. Can you share more about the filming of this scene?
That scene is one of my personal favorites, of course, and that is the one scene I feel that unequivocally it is touched by God. I would say co-written by Saint Ignatius. You know why? As I said, I grew up in a Jesuit school, and we would have, of course, retreats and so on. And in one of these retreats, that exercise of imagining Jesus in a chair in front of you, that was introduced to us by a Jesuit priest, my own, the one who raised us in this tradition. And so I thought of bringing that into the movie because, in a way, kind of like that's straight from the source, right? And it is in that moment that I think there's an awakening on both of them, both the prostitute character and also in Ignatius, that maybe this is what I'm meant to do. Maybe I'm meant to bring healing instead of violence into the world.
And what is he saying to you?
That he understands me. That he loves me. That he does not care where I've been, he just cares where I'm going.
And regarding the filming of that scene, we used that scene as one of the audition pieces during our casting process. When Marta and Andreas, the two actors in that scene, read it during audition, it was already like that. It was already that touched. It was already that blessed. We did not have to change anything at all. And when we were filming it for real, for the actual shoot, our goal was always, let's recapture the energy that was in that audition. And they just were able to do it. It was amazing. It was wonderful. I feel like in cases like that, me as a director, I feel like in many ways, God was directing that scene.
Paulo, I also want to talk about at the end of the film, St. Ignatius, he receives this beautiful letter from the princess who he was madly in love with. But, now she's affirming him in his pursuit of a godly life. And she shared how he saved hers when she was vulnerable. And there's this stunning quote It says, at times, all it takes to save a life is one person to see what's precious in you. Can you share a little bit more about the meaning of that quote and the impact that you're hoping that it has on viewers?
I feel like in studying Saint Ignatius's life, a lot of scholars mentioned that he had probably most likely gone through pretty much a major depression, pretty much a crisis in his mental state and of course his spiritual state. And I feel like having gone through that and survived through the grace of God, he was adamant about being able to share his experience and how how his experience can help bring those who are suffering through it back to a fuller life. And I think you see it everywhere, that in stories of cases where people are succumbing to despair, almost succumbing to despair, many times it's just one person who showed that they cared. It's one person who called. It's one person who just checked up on them randomly, and that turned them back from the edge, So it's all in line with this whole, I think God sends the person you need to hear from at the exact moment you need him or her. And I think that Ignatius wanted us to know that our smallest action can make a world of difference to one person, right? And instead of his whole vainglorious feeling of, I want to save the world, or I want to save my country, I want to fight sometimes all you have to do is fight for one person. And that changes the whole world.
And see what's precious in them. And don't we all want that? Don't we want someone to just see what's precious in us, to see us as a child of God, to say, you're worth something, you're worthy, you're not worthless. I'm not going to throw your life around. I'm not going to throw it out, right? But to see someone, to know them, to love them. We're all longing for that. And the difference that we can make when we turn our lives to God, he gives us those moments, those opportunities to see people, to see what's precious in one another. Pauline, can you please tell us more about the 500th anniversary of St. Ignatius of Loyola's conversion, the founding of the Jesuit order, and the importance of the timing of this film?
So this year, the Jesuits are celebrating the Ignatian year. So that's 2021, 2022. So in this year, they're celebrating the 500 years, as you said, of the conversion of St. Ignatius. So it's a big celebration for us, but for everyone. But for us, it's a great timing, because imagine our film is about exactly that, the conversion. It's not about the whole life of St. Ignatius.
Paulo, can you tell us how people can see the film?
We have distributors around the world. So in each country, there would be a specific company that would be handling our distribution. In the US, I think it's very much available through Amazon, because Ignatius Press released it in the US under the US title is Ignatius of Loyola. So if you search for that, you'll find it on Amazon. And I think sometime soon into the streaming services as well.
In the UK, it's available on Prime Video. So just look for it on Prime.
Great. Pauline, can you share how our viewers can learn more about your mission at Jesuit Communications?
You can visit our Facebook page. We're on Facebook. It's JESCOM.ph. And of course, we have a website, jescom.ph. So we're regularly posting our new projects in our social media platforms and our website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us today. So thank you again for sharing this positive, inspiring message of St. Ignatius of Loyola.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Your mission is wonderful. Thank you.
For all of you watching, Ignacio De Loyola is an incredible film that will raise your heart to heaven and help you understand God's will for your life. I highly recommend watching it as soon as possible and sharing it with friends and family. Please stay connected with us, and I hope to see you again real soon. God be with you. Shalom.
To all of the viewers of Shalom TV throughout the world, I want to encourage you not only to support this amazing media apostolate, but to spread the word to others. We all know how the internet and mass media are polluting the world with the poison of pornography and so much other forms of materialism. This is the source of eternal life, the gospel, and Shalom TV is consecrated to spreading the word of Christ. Thank you.